Welcome back. I am still in conversation with John Kampfner, Executive Director at Chatham House, Adam Drummond, Associate Director and Partner, Opinium Research, Nigel Fletcher, Political Historian at King's College London, and writer and columnist Farrukh Dhondy. Dr. Fletcher, if I can come to you, Liz Truss, her first foreign visit is set to be the United States for the UN General Assembly. What, according to you, will be the big priority for her? What would she like to achieve?
Well, I think, as has been said before, her in-tray is fairly crowded with things on the domestic front, but also in international affairs. And I think she is lucky in a way that as Foreign Secretary, she has a bit of a head start. We sometimes have prime ministers coming to office who have quite a rude awakening in having to get up to speed on international affairs. She at least has the opportunity to draw on her experience as Foreign Secretary. I think she'll be wanting to ensure that the relationship with the United States remains as close as both sides always try to say that the UK and the US should be the special relationship, although that phrase sometimes goes in and out of fashion. But I think Ukraine clearly is the major issue. She has been very hawkish on Russia. She's been at the forefront of putting in sanctions. And so I think she'll be very keen to burnish those credentials as a hawk on Russia in relation to Ukraine. You say her first visit will be to the UN. I think it's a fair bet that pretty soon after that, she will probably be going to Ukraine to meet President Zelensky. It's interesting that Boris Johnson had clearly a very good personal relationship there with President Zelensky, and I think Liz Truss will want to demonstrate that she has a similar personal relationship as well. Easier for her to do that, having been loyal to Boris Johnson. But of course, I think there's a whole range of other issues. It's been touched on before that in relation to relations with the European Union, she's going to face a number of issues there in relation to Northern Ireland and so on. But I think from her experience, we sometimes forget she is actually, although comparatively young, she is the longest serving member of the cabinet. She first joined the cabinet under David Cameron and has served in many positions in the cabinets of David Cameron and Theresa May and Boris Johnson. So she's a very experienced cabinet minister, but having been first International Trade Secretary and then Foreign Secretary, she does have that advantage. And so going to the UN in a few days' time, she's perhaps much better briefed than a lot of prime ministers would be.
Right. That is right. She has a lot of diplomatic experience behind her. Farrukh Dhondy, when it comes to India, what will be her big approach? We have been reading columns about how she would be as committed as Boris Johnson to having a trade deal with India by Diwali. What, according to you, will be her approach to India amid the current geopolitical crisis that we're looking at?
I think she'll be desperate for a trade deal with India, because after Brexit, any trade deal, right? Any trade deal with Nicaragua, for instance, would assist the British economy, because it has suffered through its severance with the European Union. The other thing is she is being very tough in her statements on the European Union. She says, she will cancel the Irish Protocol, which Boris Johnson signed. It will worsen relationships with the EU. There'll be trade sanctions in that direction. And so she'll be desperate to continue and expand the trade relations with India and other non-European countries. That's absolutely clear. So she won't only continue the policy, I think she'll make far-ranging concessions, and mutual treaty agreements with India for trade.
Right. Let me get in Adam once again. Adam, now we have spoken about her priorities in great detail. Give us a sense, will she also have the task of rebuilding the image of the Conservative Party in the eyes of the British voter after what happened with Boris Johnson, with Partygate?
Well, the main thing, as John and Nigel, I believe, have mentioned, is that you've got this enormous energy bills crisis coming down the tracks. So everybody has kind of priced in that there was going to be some sort of major intervention by the government. So you would assume and expect, and from our perspective, hope that she will be doing something along those lines. The question is whether or not that boosts the Conservative Party or whether it is just expected and it's the bare minimum. The other point is that, of course, when the Conservatives won in the 2019 election, it was a very disparate group of different types of voter that they pulled together. They had social conservatives who want a big state and lots of spending on healthcare, etc. And then you had small state liberals who want lower taxes above everything else and to cut back on social spending, etc. So Boris Johnson managed to coalesce those different groups together who have really quite different priorities. Liz Truss, from everything that she said so far, seems to come down very clearly on one side of that divide, the small state side of things. So it's a question of whether or not her first major acts are going to be completely in contravention of her political instincts in having to enact a massive sort of bailout of households and firms to help them get through the winter. More generally, though, there's the fact that the Conservatives have been in power since 2010. There's a definite feeling of sort of tiredness and exhaustion to the party. Maybe a new prime minister can bring a sense of energy to things, and essentially they do have sort of fresh ideas. But generally, sort of the sort of political pendulum and time is not really on their side.
Right. My final question to John. When it comes to China, what, according to you, will be her approach?
It will be, or at least she is flagging it to be, very similar to her Russia approach. Previously, there was a thing called the Integrated Review, which was the security and defense review that the British government's come up with every 5 years. The last one, which was issued in March 2021, so only 18 months ago, she's ordered that to be rewritten. It stated that China was a systemic rival or a systemic competitor to the UK, which was fairly standard language. The EU uses similar language. She wants to call it now an acute threat, putting it on the same level. Now, this is with Russia. Now, this is, of course, rhetoric. And there's only the Brits are very good at hubris and at hyping their role in the world. And for me, one of the really important signs of a country growing up is a country that knows exactly where it is. And so the Brits have only got a certain amount of traction with China. They should definitely, they will be folding very much behind the United States and now Australia and Japan as part of the AUKUS deal in their Indo-Pacific area. But it will be a much more confrontational one. It will much more be a friend or foe, a goodies and baddies, dictatorships and democracies one. And that brings us really interestingly back to the India question, because India is absolutely pivotal to the UK. It is now culturally, it is in terms of having jettisoned our near neighbours as our closest friends, otherwise known as the Europeans. The British are now scratching around looking for who they can have alliances with. And that is predominantly dusting down the Commonwealth. And yet at the United Nations General Assembly, when there was the vote on Russia and Ukraine, pivotal Commonwealth countries led by India and South Africa did not take the view of unequivocal support for Ukraine. They very much hedged their bets. India at the same time has a very fractious and difficult relationship with China. So it will be absolutely, as Farouk said earlier, she will go hell for leather to sign a trade deal with India. Whether or not it's good for British business is moot, because I think the Brits will compromise in order to get it over the line in time for Diwali. But they will do pretty much anything and everything to keep India and other Commonwealth states as close as possible.
All right, we leave it there for the moment, but thank you very much, John Kampfner, Farrukh Dhondy, Adam Drummond, and Dr. Nigel Fletcher for joining us here on Global Eye, explaining to the Indian audience the ramifications of this Conservative Party vote in the UK and the appointment of Liz Truss as the next Prime Minister. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.